Okay, good morning. I'm Michael Kassler, the Chair of the 2022 Elected Official Compensation Commission. This is our fourth meeting. We'll go around to introduce ourselves. Director?
Thank you. Sure. Good morning. Are you on? My name's Nicole Brandon. I'm the Human Resources Director with the City of Columbus.
Nia Walters, Columbus City Council.
Greg Beaverson, Compensation Manager, Department of Human Resources. Sorry.
Fred Rancier, Commissioner.
Jason Jenkins, Office of the Mayor.
Darlene Wilds, Deputy City Auditor.
Sarah Ingalls, Commissioner.
Okay, welcome everybody. We have a to-do list that Naya has prepared for us. And first I'd ask you to, have you had an opportunity to review the meeting minutes from last meeting? Are there any corrections or additions?
I have none.
Could I have a motion to approve?
Second.
All those in favor say aye. Thank you. Naya, you want to, shall we go first to Greg with his updates and then get into a discussion about the draft report?
Yes,
Okay.
Chair.
Okay, Greg, it's all yours.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Oh, you do? Okay, great, thank you. Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Commissioners. You have asked for a couple of additional things that I have included in this presentation, but just starting there on page 1, first slide, I want to update you on the municipalities we've had respond, additional municipalities we've had respond, and it's not coming up very well there on the screen, but I will go through here and let you know. I know it was very important to the Commission that Cincinnati, Cleveland, and Indianapolis respond to our survey. We do have data for Cincinnati, Cleveland, and Indianapolis. It is basic data. So I never actually received the survey completely filled out and sent back as we did with most or all of the other cities. We also did receive Charlotte information from them. So that was really important because they are actually very similar to us. That is one of those core peer cities that I discussed, I think, in our first meeting that we consistently use to compare ourselves with. So what I've updated it with is 16 respondents, which is a 67% response rate, which is outstanding. Anytime you do a survey, you hope for a number that high. If you count them up, it will actually be 17, but I did not include Indianapolis in that response rate, and the reason for that is because I never actually heard from anyone at Indianapolis, so the data that we have from Indianapolis is taken from publicly available sources. It's not a lot of data either, so I just wanted to spell that out.
But it includes the salaries.
Yes, sir, it does. It includes the salaries of the mayor, council member, and council president, and that's all that was available.
Okay.
Table 1, page 3 of your handout. This has changed. This is the population of the cities. This has changed only in the sense that those 4 cities were added. Page 4, it's table 2. This is an update to the mayor and city manager base salary. You can see the median mayor salary there, $144,395. And again, you might recall that that is the market rate. The addition to this data that was requested last time is on the next page, Table 3. The commission asked for, to look at the salary per capita. So that's the format that this follows, is after each elected official will then come the elected official's per capita salary. And that's what we see here. This information obviously will be the same for the mayor alone, but this includes the mayor and city manager data. Table 4, just the mayor. Table 5, next page, mayor per capita salary. And I feel like I'm rushing through these. I don't mean to. If of course, you have any questions, please stop me as we go. Next page, page 8, table 6, shows city attorney base salary. And then on the following page, the city attorney per capita salary. Page 10, table 8, the auditor. And then the following page, the auditor per capita salary.
Darlene, the auditor controller positions in other cities, I'm thinking of cities other than in Ohio, are their roles significantly different from ours?
They could be. We'd have to look at the responsibilities in each one, because they could have a controller and they could have like a finance director, and the finance director could be doing some of the things that Auditor Kilgore does here. So it
Okay.
just depends on the city.
Okay.
I would also note that last commission, they did note that the auditor has significant responsibility, more like a CFO than other auditors and comptrollers and so that is kind of how they looked at her salary in past, because of the more CFO nature of her position.
Okay.
Okay, page 12, table 10. Council member base salary. Indianapolis has an interesting system, as a few other municipalities being studied. They're what we call a unigov, where the county and the city are together. And I believe this information is fairly fresh in my mind. I believe it's 25. And they actually call them counselors, city-county counselors, I believe is what they're called. There was a notation in the research about how they describe what a counselor is. And interestingly enough, it did mention, I believe it's from their charter, but don't hold me to that. It did even mention, it discussed the part-time issue there. On the next page, table 11, the council member per capita salary.
Craig, is this based off of the new 2020 census data, that the per capita?
This is, it is. It's the most recent census data. Let's see, the estimated between census reports that every 10 years, the Census Bureau does an estimated increase or decrease, and they do that in July of not the next year, but the year after that. So this data would be the most up-to-date. It would be for 2020, because 2021 data will not come out until this July. I had to think about that for a little bit.
This is the 2020 census.
That's correct. It
Okay.
is. Okay, page 14, table 12, council president salary. In page 15, table 13, council president per capita salary. And you might recall that this was a smaller slide, a smaller graph last time, and the reason for that is because not all councils have council presidents. I did want to make a note that Cincinnati has what they consider a council president, but that position is not paid any differently than the other council members. And it is the council member pro tem who acts as the president. Yeah, but it's the same amount, and because that person functions in the role of president, I also included Cincinnati in that data.
How long have they had a mayor down there? Because they've had a city manager for decades, but only in recent years. There used to be a council president who acted as mayor, but now they actually have a mayor, right?
That's correct.
And that's not a mayor that's like the number one vote getter of a council election. That's an office that runs independently of council members, right?
That's my understanding.
Yeah, okay.
Page 16, table 14, it's table 14. And this is just an update to the number of council members. And it actually did not change with that additional data. Median council members is 13, and I do recall the average is 15 per municipality. Page 17, table 15. This is the update to the full-time or part-time council members, including those cities. Percentages up at the top in the second row have been updated. Another follow-up from the last meeting was the commission asked if we could ask the municipalities that had full-time members of council if that full-time status could be located. Is that written down somewhere? Or is it just that's the way it's always been, or what have you? I did not get a lot of response to that follow-up question, even with additional phone calls in addition to the email. I have two cities who originally got back to me with the same information that they originally provided, which was something to the effect of, yes, they're full-time. Well, we knew they were full-time, but the question we were asking was, they're full-time, but is that codified somewhere? Is it in the charter? Is it a matter of policy? That's the question that I asked. They said that they would get back to me, and I just haven't heard anything as of today. So those cities are noted here with an asterisk: Denver, El Paso, and Jacksonville. The answer to the question from each of those cities is that it is not specified in the charter whether they are full-time, but they are considered full-time employees. And then finally,
Just to juxtapose
yes,
that to our charter, which specifies that the mayor in Columbus cannot serve in any other, can have another job, as opposed to, as I think we've discussed before, the city attorney and city auditor. Uh, it specifies their full-time jobs, but it doesn't say that they can't have. And in fact, I've learned that each of them do, although they're, I think, the auditor, she teaches at the Glenn School, as did her predecessor. And I think in the case of the city attorney, he does some basketball refereeing. So I don't think either would be considered to have any conflict.
I think council president is the only council member who does not have outside employment. That's what we've discussed.
I'm sorry.
Council president is the only council member who does not have outside employment. Every other council member does.
I'm curious, maybe I'm skipping ahead to page 18.
I was just going to say there, Commissioners, that that's a great segue into the last page. The commission also asked, where is that information in our charter? And that's what you see on the final page and last slide. Qualifications for elected officials regarding other employment. And I tried my best to just highlight those areas out of the charter and include them here. But yes, it actually says for the mayor, I know it's small print there, the mayor shall not hold any other public office, and then in bold there, or employment. And
How do we
it,
define public office? Elected office is public office, or is appointed office a public office? Are you a public official as opposed to, well, you know, I don't know, I really and truly do not know what the answer to this, but I will recall that when I was being qualified for appointment on city council, I was also appointed to the Central State Board. And the waiver, as I recall, it was concluded that those were two public offices. One uncompensated, but a public office. And that's why I'm raising the question now. The waiver I received was that the city of Columbus did not have any jurisdiction over any budgetary or other related matters. That was 12 years ago, or more. So I think, yeah, I think that's
so,
a
too.
question that needs to be answered.
if I had to venture a guess, my guess would be is that any other public office would be elected. In other words, the mayor of the city of Columbus cannot be an elected council member of Hilliard
Right.
or any other suburb. That's
With the
my
mayor,
guess. I'm
I
not
think
an
it's very
expert,
clear,
but-
but I'm not as certain.
It does go on to say, this is the section that I did not highlight, except that of notary public, member of the state militia or any reserve units of the armed forces of the United States.
That really
So-
was the question.
And it appears to be the same or very similar language for the other elected officials. But the main point here, I think what we found is that it's the mayor's position that's the only one that includes the term "or employment." No, any other, shall not hold any other public office or employment, and it does not say that for any of the other elected officials.
Robert is available by phone until 11:15, so I can give him a quick call to find out what is considered public office. So I'll step out and do that.
And then I think there's both the question and then there's the history, right? So there's been a lot of appointments and elected officials over this 12-year period of time. I can only relate to a designated point in time. So, you know, what has been the practice? But I think that really the question opens up when we find an exception for notary public. You know, that's not compensate, well, it's, you know.
The ordinance was updated in 2014 and then again in 2018, so it's possible that that had been changed. I don't know the legislative history to answer that, so that might be a good question for the city attorney as well.
For public office, for 2018 update, I know at least for council members, that was an update made for the districts. And so it kind of just clarified things in terms of them having to live in their district.
Did it change that language at all?
No, same language.
Okay.
I will step out. and give
2014 perhaps, I don't know.
I know 2014 was the last charter commission. Was in 2014, before this current one.
That didn't change that specific section at all?
I don't think that section has changed. At least I know for council members it didn't. I can't speak to the other offices, but I know for at least council members and council president, that language is the
Then
same.
that wouldn't be an edit.
Further my comment, I think I also was on Civil Service Commission at that time, that I did have to resign from the Civil Service Commission to accept an appointment to city council. So, you know, there again is that flex issue.
Within the same entity,
It's within the same
however,
entity,
yeah.
yes.
But being an elected official, one of these elected officials we're studying, and being on the Columbus City School Board
I think that's an issue.
would be, yeah, and.
As I read this, I mean, as I look at this, that could be an issue.
You can't do both.
No,
That's been publicized in the newspaper some years ago,
yeah, I recall.
yeah.
And in that example, the school board is elected, and that's, to my point, I think that's what that's referring to.
But as Fred was commenting about the Civil Service Commission, he wasn't elected to the Civil Service Commission, he was appointed, but he still couldn't. There was still a conflict.
Right,
It's not
but-
just,
But they
just
would be
being an
in the
elected
same
official.
entity, though, the city of Columbus. So there would be a conflict of interest there, presumably, someone on the Civil Service Commission, but also being a member of council.
Yeah, I don't think it's so much.
You know what the conflict was? Budget.
Oh.
And that's where I get to my ethics question. If you're voting on a budget and the entity that you are working for, appointed to, whatever, we have an ethics issue here. You can't vote on the entire budget because it's zero sum. So anything that doesn't get in,
That's what council does every year.
I know.
I mean, the charter specifies that they do that.
Yeah, so it's in the select, it's
I mean,
a
that's-
qualification for the position, I think is really where this is boiling down. If you're going to run for city council, you must be aware, you're gonna give up this, you're gonna give up, what you're giving up in order to do that. It reaches into that question.
Greg, you got anything else for us?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I have one more thing. There was an additional request. Yes?
Chairman, can I ask a question before you leave this slide?
Of course.
And I just want this for clarification. On page 4, you list mayor and city managers. And I'm assuming the city managers in those areas they're there because it's a weak mayor? Help me understand that.
It is most likely a weak mayor form of government as opposed to a strong mayor, which is what ours is.
And so when you show the median income for mayors, you show only the mayors here and the same median on page 6 for mayors. So are we taking zero consideration for the city managers' salaries
Well,
in those areas?
the commission originally asked to look at the data in both ways, and so that's why we have both of those slides. Yes, the mayor's salary, that's correct. Well, we're looking at the city manager's salary in the sense that they are represented here in the graph, but no, it was never requested to sort it by city manager, which of course is something that I could easily do.
It just seems that we're comparing our mayor to the salaries of weak mayors when we do that. And so the fact that we're looking at a city manager's salary, but then not using it for the median salary, at least on page 4, it seems a little, what is that data there for then? And so I just wanted to question
Well,
that.
that's certainly something I could do. I could produce that data, analyze it in that way, and have it to the commission this afternoon.
And
you wanna
again,
see
I
that?
don't
Do
know
that.
if it's, would we compare our mayor to, say, the mayor of Kansas City or to the city manager in Kansas City?
To the mayor in Kansas City.
Salary-wise, but I mean, when you're looking at the role, I'm trying to understand if it's the mayor to the city manager, right?
You raise a good point. And I don't know why city managers get paid so much more than the mayors, but,
Because they're professional,
Right.
if you will.
Yeah.
okay.
They're not
So
tied
our
to-
strong mayor isn't a
You know,
professional.
like you were making the case, like you were, well, you were making the case to me yesterday about to be the city auditor or to be the city attorney, you need to be a CPA, or you should be a CPA, or you need to be a lawyer. To be a city manager, you need to have credentials as well.
We would hope that, well, we can't rely on the voting public to discern that. It's the issue.
Just on this issue of strong mayor, weak mayor, et cetera, the school that I grew up in here at City Hall was that we're really a strong council form of government, not a strong mayor. And that is really found in that council can override a veto of the mayor's without a superordinate vote. They can pass something 4-3, and the mayor vetoes it, and they can override his veto with a 4-3 vote. That, I think, the academics would say makes our form of government a strong council. But we all know that as a practical matter, the mayor proposes and council disposes, right?
And that was probably during an era where it was more diverse in terms of political activity. The mayor.
So there were Republicans in the mayor's office and a democratically controlled council. That's right. Point well taken, yeah. Okay. Yes, ma'am.
I was able to get with Robert, and so he was able to point me in the right direction in terms of what a public office is under the Ohio Revised Code. And so the Ohio Revised Code, Chapter 149, Section .011A states that a public office includes any state agency, public institution, political subdivision, or other organized body, office, agency, institution, or entity established by the laws of the state for the exercise of any function of government. Public office does not include a nonprofit corporation.
Still important to know. And this goes to your member of a school board. And the way that's reading, it's not restricted by jurisdiction, is it? If somehow I live in Columbus but was on the school board in Bexley, or something like that, I think that applies. It still would apply. And the only reason I raise that is because we do have school districts that overlap jurisdictions.
Right. Okay, commissioners, do you have any questions or comments of Greg and his data? Yeah, Greg, go ahead and share with us.
Okay, Mr. Chairman.
I asked Greg to come up with this for us.
Yes, one other, and this is the document I'm referring to. There is not a slide for this, so you should have a copy of it there in front of you. The chairman asked for the wage increases for each employee group at the city of Columbus. I went back to 2017 because that was the beginning of a contract cycle. We negotiate contracts every 3 years here. And so I took this out to the current year. And essentially what you have there are all 7 employee groups listed. They are not referred to as unions because the one there that says MCP is the management compensation plan. That is not a union.
But there is a contract with the city, it's negotiated.
No, Commissioner. That is essentially an ordinance.
Okay.
And,
How
pardon?
does it define, how does it reach its conclusions with respect to cost of living? Is that what this is, cost of living?
No, I'm sorry. These are wage increases per year.
Okay.
We call them across-the-board pay increases. There is one union that calls it a percentage-based increase, but essentially it's a pay increase every year that for 6 of these columns is negotiated. It is not for MCP.
And how is MCP determined?
MCP is determined initially by the mayor. That is essentially a suggestion to the other elected officials. The elected officials over the years have chosen to agree with that percentage increase, decrease it, or increase it, or not provide one at all.
Greg, the recommendation that goes to the mayor's from you, so can you share where that?
Yes,
comes from?
of course. That recommendation comes from the organization that certifies me as a compensation professional. It's called World at Work. It used to be called the American Compensation Association. There is an annual survey that they do that is very extensive. It goes to both public and the private sector. In August, sometimes September of every year, they release results of that survey for the coming year. And what we go on is the projected average pay increase for employers, both public and private. And there are several different types of employees and employee groups listed. And we go off of that recommendation, or, excuse me, that salary.
That's what you're recommending to the governor, I mean, to the mayor.
Correct.
Then he can accept or
Correct. That's
or
correct.
adjust.
I would add, just in working with this, generally, if you are a union, the wage increases that you're getting are not in addition to COLA, which is what the former commission has recommended. So when we look at this, this is what they get. They don't get COLA on top of that, which is what,
That's my next question.
yeah.
But the elected officials cannot have a pay increase in office. So the COLA is representing the pay increase.
On top of the paid increase that was also awarded.
Yeah.
So they get double whammy, whereas the city workers do not get that. Yeah.
Because in our conversation, I said, this COLA thing is still a mystery to me. It doesn't sound, if we set that's a formulaic kind of thing, but it's not necessarily what's happening in the economy. So if we said 3%, and the cost of living went up 6% or down to 0%, it's really, that's why we're using CPI, but it's really adjusting a salary, because we fixed the number somehow. And that's, I think that's part of your point. And how do you unravel that in real terms?
Well, I'm not sure I follow you, Fred. We fixed the number, we specify what the number, the past commission has specified what the number will be, not knowing what the number is. They've specified what the formula is for finding the number, right?
I think we used, what is it, Midwest something or other, and whatever it was some variation of that number, and then it fixed across 5 years.
Yeah, there are wage increases every year, and then the COLA is based on that wage increase. And then you look at the next year, the wage increase happens, and then the COLA.
COLA is based on wage increase?
No, the COLA is based on the COLA number, but
Okay.
it is added on top of whatever the wage increase is.
Okay.
So it's a double increase.
Okay.
But for the elected official salaries, they only get the wage increase that first year. So whatever
Right.
increase they're gonna get is their increase, and then the COLA is added every year, but there's no increase plus COLA. So I just want to make sure that we're all kind of clear on the fact that there's only one increase, because the city attorney determined last time around that there couldn't be a staggered increase. The increase had to happen at the front end, and that's why they chose a higher increase at the front end that got them to their end result with the COLA over the next roughly 3 years after that first increase.
Yeah.
Okay.
And this year, 2022, was the only time that a percentage increase was given. Every other year, it's always been COLA.
So this kind of raises a question for me. Where was COLA part of the charter amendment that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. You have to take into account the CPIU, and according to Dr. Lafayette, who gave us the presentation, I think we used the Midwest all-urban one, so it's like an over-encompassing one, because it's the one that is the least volatile out of the other ones, because there are other ones that can be used, but they're more volatile. And so it's kind of, at least the way my understanding is that it's looked at every year. And so the average that we have over they look at the average of the last 4 years, so 2018 to 2021. And because 2021, I believe, was an outlier, the COLA is sitting average about 2.23%. In past years, it's been about 1.48% or 1.52%, somewhere around there. But as a result of, I assume inflation, things were higher last year. So I think the COLA was around 4 or 5%, which is.
I have that information.
Yes.
Yes, I have that
Keep
information.
in mind, when we talk about these COLAs, they compound,
Yes.
right?
4 years, and I have the charter language right here. An annual cost of living adjustment which shall not exceed the average increase in the consumer price index or successor thereto during the preceding 4 years. So we looked at that data at the last meeting 2 weeks ago. For 2018, the CPI was 1.84. 2019, it was 1.51. 2020, it was 1.04, and for 2021, it was 4.54. And that reflects that increase from 1 year to another in the so-called market basket of consumer goods and services that the CPI represents. And then just one other thing. This is the section we look at, according to Dr. Lafayette. It's all items in Midwest, size Class A, all urban consumers not seasonally adjusted.
Okay. This maybe is a place where I can pass out my doodling. This is not what I told you I would try to come to the meeting with today, but here is, thank you. So one of the things that makes me scratch my head a lot is that our charge is to come up with recommended increases for elected officials, but not for this year or next year, for 4 years out and 5, 6, 7, 8 years. So I took that sheet that we've all seen, what the current salaries are, and I compounded those salaries over 3 years at 2%, at 3%, and at 4%. And you see those salary levels there in my handwriting in the bottom right-hand corner. And I did that just as an exercise to, does everybody have 3 of those? Is that right? Okay, so you can see what it is. If it was 2% on average, if it was 3, if it was 4. And it pointed out to me, as I repeat ad nauseum, that when you compound interest, the numbers can grow pretty quickly. So I think that's something that we need to be aware of. We don't know what the salary level will be in 4 years, that we're making recommendations to add on to.
Right, this is kind of jogging. Finally, my memory is being jogged from 5 years ago. 4 years ago.
That might help out a little, I don't know.
I think that was very important in our setting the salary, was how much this compounded effect. Where would they be right now while we're looking at it now? Where would the salary, and are we getting closer to where we concluded this city sat in relationship to our comparable cities? I think was that not the logic?
I do recall that. I'd have to re-review the report, the final report that Joe Ellen Klein wrote. But I do recall creating some projections going out. Well, I don't remember how far it went out, but obviously into the future, but the projections were fairly high in terms of percentages, just so the commission could see everything and all possibilities.
This is very helpful.
Their projections are in there, and I included their projection for 2022 in the existing report draft that I created, and so they did project kind of what they would be making in 2022. I think it's also important to note that this would be the first time that, like, no matter who's voting on this, we don't know that they'll be receiving the salary increase because of the reset in 2023 of the election where all 9 council members will reset. And so this is kind of the first time where, we don't know who's actually going to be there when these salary increases go into effect in 2026.
Query.
Which is fine.
Yeah.
We don't.
Right.
These were the projections that I gave the commission last
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, okay. Oh, this might be helpful, too.
Yes, and that is a part, it's very similar to what we did 4 years ago.
Yeah. Yes. So, the president of city council doesn't run for that position. He's appointed by the council.
That's correct.
He runs for
Okay.
it amongst his council members.
Okay. Because we're making a distinction in pay, I wanted to be,
And we also have the president pro tem, which is not differentiated in pay, but is also a similar type of position that is,
and
The fill-in.
the president of city
Yeah.
council is who appoints the chair of the various council committees.
Well, technically, yes, but, technically, it's a majority of council members do that. But presumably, the president of council has that majority to do that.
they have to request and put preferential, and then they get slotted, and then they vote on it all together,
Okay.
To your
so.
question about the dollar amount, so I think the projected for 2022 was $205,571. The actual salary currently is $204,683. So not too far off,
Right.
but the projection was that, and because you don't know,
And that
so
was a
kind of-
2.23%.
Yes, it was 2.23%.
CPI.
And that was based on the last 4 years.
Okay.
Of CPI, of the average CPI as mandated by the charter.
Okay. Yeah, this compounding effect, yes.
Particularly if the inflation rate climbs like they're saying it is, or predicting that it will. Yeah, it could.
This commission is sitting with a number of issues we did not have. We did not have a pandemic. We did not have a rearrangement of the whole employment, piece. we weren't in a war, right, or funding a war. Whether we're in a war or not, that's one question. We're certainly funding a war. You know, therefore, oil prices and other inflationary factors have kicked in that didn't exist then, so 2.2% probably felt a little reasonable. But we bumped up in 2021 to 4.5%. And a couple of those things I mentioned weren't in effect. Well, they did not have an impact on that number. That will have it may have an impact, you know, this is guessing.
Well, and historically, we've been at record lows for interest rates, record lows for a lot of things, taxes included,
That's
right?
not gonna remain, right? What would you say?
Oh, my anticipation is no, but I also am not an economist, so.
Yeah, this is, we're in new water. I guess we can't rely entirely.
And the thing that got my attention when you were reciting those numbers, was, what did you see the most recent year was 4?
4.5.
So
high.
But
that's
the
that's
rest of the
a that's a
years-
big number compared to the previous
A
years.
salary increase of that amount is hefty.
Exactly.
You know,
Right.
that's a big salary increase.
But I think that we have to take that into account, though, by the charter, that we have to consider the average of the past 4 years of the CPIU. And so that leaves us at 2.23% based off of, you know, what we all know to be like a largely inflationary one from last year at 4.54%. If we look at the previous years, when none of them got over 2%.
But that is, COLA is not am I correct that COLA is not mandated by charter? However, if this commission and council adopts the COLA and says we will award a COLA, then that's how we will assess the COLA. Is that what the charter says? But it doesn't say you have to award a COLA.
It cannot exceed
Right.
that amount.
It cannot exceed what?
It cannot exceed the average increase in the consumer price index
Okay.
during the preceding 4 years.
Okay.
So one of the things I think it's been clarified now, because this chart, in the bargaining units, they do not receive COLAs. Okay, because one of my concerns, are we bumping up against collective bargaining by setting a,
Well, I mean, I know that there's sentiment amongst a majority of the commissioners that they don't want to be recommending increases that are in excess of what the bargaining units have negotiated. I know that there's a majority of commissioners that feel that way.
so why in 2020, there were no,
Pandemic year.
Yeah, we didn't.
there were no contracts negotiated that year?
Contracts, and they got 0 in 2020, all of the.
Very unsure time as far as the city budget is concerned.
And I tell you, I just can't, I'm so anxious about, because we don't know what these numbers are going to be. So we don't know what we're recommending to add on to an unknown number 4 years out. I don't like the design of this, frankly. I really don't. But that's what we're faced with. That's what we got to live with. Yes, sir.
Ask a question just for clarity. So prior to the 4.5% that was given for the last charter commission, or I'm sorry, compensation.
During your question, 4.54% was not given. No, it was not given because the commission from 2018 said that in 2022, there would not be a COLA. In lieu of COLA, it would be percentage increases. And that's what the elected officials received. However, the commission, the,
2 for the mayor.
And 2 for the mayor and 4 for the city attorney and city auditor respectively.
right,
I think it was a math thing where we just added up what the COLA would look like.
I think what happened is, and it talks about this a little bit in the report, is that you were wanting to give staggered increases, but the city attorney said that wasn't okay, and so you kind of mashed up the numbers and you gave, I think the initial for council was 25%, but you all decided to go with the 20%, assuming that the 5% will be made up with the COLA, specifically for council. the others, there wasn't really as much discussion in terms of how the decision was made.
So back to the, we
Yeah,
don't have to have, we don't have to have a.
I'm just trying to understand what the percentages were. And I know Kiana was in the last process, so I was hoping that she would be here to kind of help me understand what that historical data was on why they made the increases, but that helps. So.
Well, Fred was on that committee.
Okay, I wasn't, okay, so just trying to figure out what the reasoning was behind some of the increases.
For council specifically, I can tell you that they treated it as a catch-up. Like, when they were looking at the payment of council members in comparison to the other comparator cities, our council members were receiving significantly less than other council members. And so essentially, the conversation was, how do we kind of modernize council and bring them into the same realm as other comparator cities in terms of compensation? For the others, I think it was just looked at like in terms of what their workload was, you know, per capita and things of that nature. All those things were considered. But I will say with specificity that the most impactful increase was made to council based on looking at other comparator cities and how much those council members were making in their other cities.
And that takes me back to Director Brandon's statement in regards to city managers. When we're looking at roles and responsibilities of a weak mayor versus a city manager, does our mayor, who technically would be considered a strong mayor, have the same roles and responsibilities of what would be considered a city manager or a weak mayor, right? So what salaries are we comparing at that point?
Yeah, this is, we're never gonna get this is never gonna be a perfect apples to apples comparison. And we have to appreciate that as we look at all these numbers.
Ultimately, we're responsible to the citizens.
Excuse me?
Elected officials. Ultimately, we're responsible to the citizens and not the elected official. So we have to kind of decide what we think is a public expectation of salary and income.
But just to kind of circle, make sure I understand where we are here. So this commission, Naya, is not required to express recommendations for future salaries in the context of COLA, right? I mean, we could say in 4 years, give them all 50 cents, or give them all $500, or $5,000, or what have you. It doesn't have to be in the COLA format.
As long as
Or
it
does
doesn't
it?
exceed.
So you do have to look at it as if you're going to give an increase, that has to be whatever it is, and that's it. So if you choose to not do any COLA in any of the other years, that means whatever they're paid, let's say in 2026, it has to be the first year, that's it. And that's what they would make for the remainder of the 4 years, with no increases at all, because there isn't an opportunity to go back and make an increase. So that doesn't include inflation, that doesn't include growing population, like, all those things are not considered. And I think, so COLA is to basically look at the market and kind of assess the market and assess if there should be an addition to their salary based on the market basket of goods and costs and services and things.
This question, though, is the COLA is the cap. So the Charter Commission says that you use this formula, that's how we're gonna assess what the COLA is.
Yeah.
However, we could say, and I'm not advocating for any side, but we could say, you know, in this year one, we're gonna assess $1,000 addition. In year two, we're gonna assess $2,000, $1,000, $2,000. And it's a set number, and as long as that number does not exceed COLA,
Okay.
then it would be okay.
So you're asking if you could do a number versus a percentage? That is.
A number
that's
instead of
defined.
saying COLA.
So a number that's defined, so every year.
Or we could say half of COLA, or a
Okay.
third of COLA, or
So my
whatever.
question is, and this is just a question because I'm unsure, what is your rationale for getting to that number?
I think if I'm understanding the chair, it's a fear that inflation is going to be unpredictable and high for the next couple years and may not be that way forever. And so if we are setting wage increases that are many years out and we're using the last 4 years of data, those numbers may be very high and artificially inflate what COLA would be in, if you looked at it in a one-year period, because we're looking at a four-year look back.
If I could though, Commissioner, the COLA is the cost of living adjustment. So it wouldn't be inflated in any way. It would actually match the cost of living. So.
If salaries aren't going up.
Correct, yes. So, and I think that is one of the things that the commission, the Charter Commission took into account, is that they didn't want to go with just 1 year, because it could be extraordinarily low. One year, we had a CPI of 0 or near 0. And another year, it could be extraordinarily high, especially in comparison with previous years. That's what we found with 2021. So that was the brilliance, for lack of a better term, of saying, well, instead of just choosing 1 year to base it on, let's choose a number of years, 4 prior to it.
Because the COLA adjusts every year, when you're making a number, do you really know what number is the number? Because it fluctuates every year. I mean, we talked about it being 1%. 1% 1 year, and it's been 4.5% last year. And so it's harder to kind of say this is a number without exceeding it, because we don't know what that is. And so it's harder to kind of, I guess the idea behind having just saying the COLA means that whatever adjustments are made, we're staying within that, versus, you know, setting a number, and that number, if it's a 0%, $1,000 is over that 0%. So then we would be in violation of the charter. So it's like, how do you manage that part of it? And that's I guess would be my concern.
Well, I think that's what Commissioner Ingles was saying, is that if it's $1,000, to use your example, as long as that doesn't violate the charter and exceed the COLA. But
Basically, if then clause, 1,000, if not, then.
the language would have to be in there.
Yeah, okay. And so that's kind of what I was trying to just kind of circle through my mind of like, what that looks like in terms of making sure that we stay within the confines.
So there's a few things here that I think we cannot overlook. One is, I believe a goal of the commission is to be certain we are paying sufficiently to attract the highest and most talented. We don't control the outcome of elections. So, but if we look at a population of Columbus, we have, you know, a high income, a middle income and a lower income, and probably at the lower income level is the broadest band of those three bands. So a lot of the discussion, you know, if I'm a citizen in the third band, the salary of a council member might look attractive, right? It might look very attractive. I'll run for it. I don't think someone makes a decision about running for mayor. I'm not sure about council, but I don't think mayor, city attorney, and auditor is based on how much they're making. It's public record. They understand. Our job is to keep it competitive, to assure that we are getting the highest quality of talent. But anybody can serve as mayor. I don't think everybody can serve as city attorney, so our pool just shrunk, and probably that lower band is not that low band is really not relevant. It's same with the auditor, not relevant to the determination. So all of that to say, you know, if I'm running for if I'm going to run for city council or any of these elected offices, am I really looking at salary? I mean, or cost of living as a determinant as to whether or not, because it's going to cost me more to run than I'm going to get paid. I'm sure the mayor's budget in his last reelection was greater than $200,000. You know, it's, you know, how do we assemble these other issues that kind of lie out there? We don't have to care at all about attracting highest and best. We can just set a salary and say, this fits comfortably within the budget of the city. We're just going to set it based on that. So, so I think there's a lot operating here in decisions or conclusions we're going to have to come to. If, in fact, the prior commission's goal was to, by this time, get the salaries where they should be, and through the cost of living, we've now achieved that, we're now going to project out another 4 or 5 years. How much difference does it make?
I think, I don't know that I've said this publicly in the commission, so I'm willing to say it, but there are studies, and I'm being the person who's quoting studies without having them in front of me, but there are studies that show that it is good to pay public officials good salaries because it does lower the incentive for corruption.
Sure.
So,
Common sense tells you that.
yeah.
And then we come back to my ethics question. Okay, if corruption is my focus, I don't think you should be out there working for other employers who may benefit one way or the other from the city's budget. So
Oh, yeah.
it's a huge circle.
But then in addition to what you're saying, looking at all of the data that's been collected is something else that should help the commission in determining what recommendations to make. And I do think that there's some legitimacy in changing or looking at page 4 and including the city manager base salary when we look at the median compared, because I'm just, looking at Charlotte, which you say is a really good comp for us, and their mayor is at $50,000. Their city manager is much higher, and I'm willing to bet that the responsibilities lie greater with the city manager, like they do here with our mayor. So I do think that we need to.
That's true. I think
change
it's a
that.
good assumption that if there's a city manager, the level of responsibility for a mayor is lower. Yeah.
Right. And so I think that it makes sense that slide 4 be, edited to reflect that. And then look at whether or not, we're comparable with those jurisdictions. And then I think at some point you'll talk about the differential between some of these elected offices and whether or not that's consistent across the board.
Let me, having said that, let me share with commissioners that I know that there is a sentiment, despite the recommendations of this commission 4 years ago, there is a sentiment out there that possibly there should be more separation in salary between the mayor and the city attorney and city auditor, given the full-time nature, just in general, the responsibilities that the mayor has. So I don't know, Nikki, if you want to speak to that any further. It's odd to me, given that 4 years ago, the commission proposed a 2% increase for the mayor and a 4% increase for the city attorney and city auditor, compressing those numbers.
My feeling about that is just one has a professional license, just the same distinction we're making about a manager and a mayor. Our mayor doesn't require anything to run for mayor. So that's where, exactly. They could have, if they choose, they could run for mayor, if that's what,
Exactly.
they could make that choice, but they could also go around the corner and make twice as much money. And so it's not quite the same with the mayor. Our former mayor did just that, right? He now probably, makes quite a bit more than he did then.
So you're saying because of the credentials?
The credentialing, what that does is limit the pool. The credentialing limits the pool. So,
But there's a greater level of authority. I mean, there's a greater area of responsibility,
well,
or, no?
I mean, it depends on what angle you choose to approach this, okay? If I choose to approach this on the basis of what makes this city strong is our strong financial background and auditing and the consistency and the AAA bond rating, that's what makes this city so strong and vibrant. That was done by the auditor's office. In terms of general law enforcement citywide, that comes from the, if that's what your focus is, that as something important, then you look at the city attorney, everybody can't be that guy. Where do you go? Mayor, the voting public can make a mistake. Can choose not to elect the highest and most qualified person on the ballot.
They can do the same in both seats.
They can, but I can't get them on the ballot without their degrees.
Right.
Or without their credentials, I should say. I'm not sure what it is that makes a city manager. It's as big a mystery to me, Nicole. Why do city managers make so much money? I mean, what are they doing in these cities that is so, well, so are we saying that mayors should be city managers?
It just depends on the jurisdiction now. I mean, there are some areas where the city manager is running the city, and the mayor is the face that goes on to parades and takes pictures, but the city manager is running the city. Here, we don't have two different positions doing that, but, so.
The pay differential is like twice as much. I mean, it's, or more. And paying a mayor on top of that. I don't get it. I don't quite, I mean, is it a city that is in distress? That's why we bring in a city manager, because we're not electing good mayors?
No, I think it's just the structure of the
It's
government.
just a structure. I mean, I've
Well, there
lived in
was a
Dallas,
time,
it's
there
the
was a
same
reason,
thing.
it was 115, 20 years ago, the city manager movement took off in Dayton and Cincinnati, and it was professionalizing corrupt governments, essentially, is what that was about. So, and that's how we have what we have 100 years later.
Tell us how you really feel.
Well, I mean, it's a historical fact that, in Cincinnati, there was a fellow by the name of Boss Cox, who was a Republican, by the way, who had a very corrupt Tammany Hall form of government down there, and that's how they got the charter rights and city manager, et cetera. Followed a couple of years after Dayton did it for the first time. So it's. I mean, I think it's well documented that there was a lot of corruption that brought on the city manager form of government.
It seems to cost the taxpayer quite a bit of money.
Maybe if they're making good decisions for the taxpayers, maybe
they're
it's
saying,
well
yeah,
spent. Right?
Okay, I concede.
Have certain qualifications. Also, city managers don't tend to be stuck to a city. They move
Yeah.
to other cities to be city manager, so they continue in the professional role, whereas mayors don't typically move to another city to be mayor. So,
Mr. Chairman, if I may make a suggestion, if I reanalyzed the data for the mayors and removed any mayors with, under a council manager form of government, and any other way that the commission would like for me to analyze or reanalyze that data and provide that to the commission this afternoon, I can email that out. I'd be happy to do that.
yeah, I think what would be helpful is Charlotte, just wild, but,
That's gonna make our mayor hot.
yeah, El Paso, if you taking the average salary between the two. I don't even know if that would make sense.
The city manager and the mayor.
Yeah. If you combined the duties, because that's what's being advocated here, right? Is that the city manager and the mayor in some cities are doing what our mayor's doing. That's what people are saying. So if you do that, you combine the two salaries, and then you use that, and then we figure out what they're paying, right? You could even divide that by 2 to see if it was evenly split, what the amount would be. And in some cities, that may be higher, in some cities, that may be lower. Like in El Paso, I think that would jack up the mayor's salary, certainly, because the city manager is so high, whereas the differentiation may not be so high in, like a Kansas or a Lexington or Memphis, certainly.
I think we kind of,
Is it the wish of the commissioners to have Greg do that?
yes, definitely.
Okay, fine.
Yeah, the more data, the better.
So combining salaries. Mayors without a city manager and mayors with a city manager, making that comparison. What about a, what about a differential? There was some discussion about that. Differentials between the mayor and the auditor and the attorney. Would you like to have any of that data?
You haven't already provided it. I think you've kind of provided it. Yeah.
Yes, City of Columbus is a 2% differential between the mayor and the city auditor,
Well,
and
all
and the
data is-
attorney, because they get paid the same thing.
I would fall on, all data is good data.
All data is good data.
It's good data. He was asking
I think
if,
we had that
should we?
philosophy at the
Yeah,
last
yeah,
commission,
exactly.
yes.
Because this is so difficult to
Certainly.
analyze. If we're just looking at mayors, we are amongst the highest. If we, yeah, if we look, and then I have to go back, and then I would want to know, okay, what's the size of Jacksonville, the per cap, I mean, there's several slides in here I'd have to put together to kind of reach my ultimate conclusion on that. But when you put it against city managers, it looks, well, what's happening here? I mean, it's,
The duties that would fall to the city prosecutor or the city auditor.
no. I think they do, well, do they appoint those?
Are.
They may not be elected offices.
City managers are not.
Yeah, they're appointed.
Yeah, I haven't studied
City
that, and I
manager
don't
being
know,
appointed.
if those are elected.
City attorney.
Most cities don't have an elected auditor.
Right.
Okay, no, he's not
Yeah.
elected, for sure.
So,
But I'm wondering if he brings a team.
the city
he or
manager
she
could hire,
brings a team.
the best, CFO that they need to run their organization, really.
But they wouldn't be managing part of those responsibilities, you don't think?
It could be for sure.
Yeah. I think that's where-
When we talk about AAA rating and those kinds of things, I mean, those are fiscal policies that are set by the city overall, so that, the mayor and the auditor are working together to make sure that we're abiding by those fiscal policies. It's not just one or the other. In a city manager situation, it could be the city manager that's pushing that.
Yeah.
That kind of reminds me that what we really had in Columbus historically is a strong auditor form of government.
We had one. We had one for,
We have two now.
yeah, we finally got to two.
So just to be clear, in addition to the others, we're looking at the mayor, City of Columbus mayor, compared to city managers, as well as a percentage differential between the mayor and city attorney and city auditors. Do I have that correct? Just want to make sure that I've got the notes written down correctly.
Yes.
I think you said that correctly.
Okay. If it's not right when I send it, let me know and I'll redo it however you need it.
And this is the question, because I'm not sure. So if you have a mayor and city manager, does the city manager operate to some degree like a chief of staff, but like not the same, obviously not the same in ways? And this is just asking for my own knowledge, because I looked up a potential, general purposes for city manager, and it says it's the chief administrative officer for the city, providing executive leadership and representation on all matters concerning city government. The duties and responsibilities are determined by council in compliance with the charter and state statutes. Responsible for planning, directing, managing, reviewing all activities and operations of the city, coordinates programs, services, and activities among city departments and outside agencies, ensures the financial integrity of the municipal organization, represents the city's interests, provides highly responsible and complex policy advice, and administrative support to the mayor and city council. And that's kind of a definition of the general purpose of a city manager. They have duties as well listed. I will spare you me reading through that entirety, but I thought about that, and I was like, if you have a mayor and you have a city manager, do you then still have like a chief of staff on top of that? Because it seems like based off this definition, that it seems like a lot of the things that a chief of staff would kind of like take on responsibility wise. And so I was just curious, because there's more knowledge in the room than mine. Just kind of thought. Yes,
And
we
the
do.
chief of staff is not a salary that we're discussing because it is not an elected position.
Exactly. And so that was just something that I would bring up as a consideration.
And the
I
other
appreciate that.
question I think this is raising, at least for me, is given that list of responsibilities, are there elected auditors, controllers? Are there elected city attorneys in the cities that use that form of government? Because if there's some of those, from what you read, I'll speak specifically to the auditor, there's the financial integrity of something along words to that effect. It doesn't sound like that, you have an elected official doing that.
I didn't mean to complicate the discussion, but it was just something that I was able to pull up quickly and just wanted to add to the conversation.
In these cities that,
The city manager?
Well, no,
No,
the,
auditor,
that we may have under our charter, elected officials that don't
We have
exist.
that data in our, we have that here. That is a question that we asked. Oh, I see it. It's up at the top. On each of them, it's a note that says, this survey assumes your elected official is elected. If the office is appointed, please make note of it in the notes column.
so we just need to say, like for Denver, Colorado, where the attorney is appointed, we need to know whether Denver, Colorado has a city manager or a mayor.
and we do know that.
Yeah, I think that's the,
Denver does not have a city manager. Denver does not have a city manager.
right. So I think it's just gonna be how a jurisdiction chooses to,
Yeah.
we're not gonna see a pattern of city manager and then they appointed everyone. It's gonna,
There's a shade, a variant on all of them, it almost seems like. Naya, could we turn our attention for a moment to you telling us about the draft report?
Yes.
And what you'd like to see us do?
Sure, I'm happy to do that. So I talked a little bit about this with the chair this morning, but, so the draft report is really kind of just a rehash of last year's report. Because this is numbers, a lot of the information is kind of like, is similar. It's not the exact in its entirety, because what they did is they decided on their numbers and they kind of had some conversations around what the discussion was and why they made those decisions. I think that up until this point, we really discussed council and council president heavily, but we haven't discussed the mayor, the city attorney, or the auditor yet. And so I want us to kind of dig more into that conversation in terms of considering all of elected officials and their pay, and having a more pointed discussion about, what you all are thinking. So the information that's in this draft report is, hold on, let me pull it up, sorry. So it basically has, a letter to the commission, which I kind of just co-opted from the last commission, an executive summary, which kind of just talks about what the requirements are by charter, in section 15. And then it just kind of outlines whatever the base salary is, whatever you decide, because I mean, we had a great discussion today around base salary and how to do COLA, so I guess whatever decisions we decide to make as a commission, or you all rather than me, whatever decision you decide to make with that, I can kind of reinsert that information. Right now, I just kind of did it in the way that it's always been done, at the 2015 and 2018 commissions. And then going into the actual data pieces, I looked at what they had in the past. We haven't really done a lot of analysis on the mayor, and what you all believe the mayor's salary should be and why you believe it should be that. And so I'm hoping some today and especially next week, that we can kind of start fleshing out, an idea of, what are we thinking? I know that Commissioner Ingles, you mentioned last time that you were inclined to give an increase to council president and council members at a larger increase than you were at the other elected officials' offices. And so what's that conversation? Why do you feel that way? Do other commissioners agree? Why do they feel that way? And then come into a consensus about what it is that you as the commission feel are reasons for increase and at what rate. With the council president and the council members, I was able to dig a little bit more in there because we've had so many extensive conversations about that. And so some of the things that I included were that, we discussed the employment status, and we determined that is largely going to be a function of the charter commission. So we kind of wanted to turn our attention away from that. But we had kind of determined that from the view of the commission, council members in their positions are full-time positions based off of, at least that's how you all are looking at it in terms of determining their salaries, that they are a full-time public office position. I noted that you all as the commission have discussed, your ethical concerns as it relates to retaining outside employment. But I acknowledge that we also had discussion around the ethical conversation about having outside employment. There is no prohibition, so regardless of what is decided, without there being a prohibition on outside employment, it's kind of like it's water under the bridge in that regard. And so discussing that, and I kind of included some of that information in this draft report. And then as far as the city attorney and the auditor, we haven't really had any discussion regarding them at all. And so I want to kind of start turning the discussion, and I appreciate, everything that everyone's contributing to the conversation, but I want to kind of start having more pointed discussions about these offices, because we are on a time clock, and time is, moving faster than I'm sure we would all like. But with that in mind, making sure that we're having those pointed conversations about what we're thinking and kind of starting to look at numbers. And I know that the number part is difficult, just considering all the different factors to take into account, and the fact that this is going to happen in 2026, and we're barely figuring out what's happening in 2022. But just continuing to think that through. I found in the previous report that there was less information shared as it relates to the city auditor and the city attorney. I feel like those conversations were smaller conversations last time. The bigger conversations being around council and the mayor, but just being mindful of that and looking at all of those things as we go forward. I think that is kind of where I will stop. I'm happy to answer any questions and continue to have conversation about this. But again, it's really just kind of, right now we're in the numbers portion of deciding, what the numbers are going to be and why they're going to be that.
So we have a document that was, this is a boilerplate essentially from last time, right?
It's boilerplate for the most part because it's standardized, but I did include some of the discussion, and so
Okay.
the discussion of why you're making the decision to increase and how much, all of that will be your own thoughts. I mean, I think that the conversation that you all had regarding council members and the full-time, part-time, a lot of that is very similar to the conversation they had before, but I, added it.
Well, so we're going to, in the end, have a report, right? A recommendation that we submit to council. And we're also going to have agreed to have a public hearing. And I was discussing this with Naya earlier this morning, and I was thinking that, well, we could have a public hearing where we solicit input on the process, or we could have a draft report that we submit that is available to the public that people could comment on. Now, I think there may be problems doing it that way, but those are two options. Do you recall how you did that 4 years ago?
I think we voted after the public comment, didn't we?
Yeah, so, and what I suggested to Chair Castler is that the public hearing be more of a solicitation of public input of things that they want us to consider when we're setting, or when you all are setting the salaries. I think that putting out a draft report that is unfinished subjects you all to being eaten alive by the public on a document that's not that's not finalized. And so I'm not suggesting to add gasoline to a fire, and I think that's kind of what that would be. I think taking their input and hearing from them and then incorporating that would give the public the best outcome. And mind you,
One or two people.
and mind you, yeah,
Unfortunately, yeah.
and mind you, like, you know, these meetings are public, so at any point, if any member of the public wants to come to these meetings and say their piece, they have an opportunity to do that, and they can kind of watch back, so they've heard everything that we have said, anyhow, but, you know, I think that as far as the report, I think I would suggest to just get solicitation and then continue to refine the report with the information that you receive from the public.
Is that acceptable to you two? Okay, we'll proceed that way. So we do have a public hearing scheduled for a week from tomorrow evening, correct? Has that been advertised yet?
Yes, so I saw an advisor go out yesterday that advertised this meeting, as well as it had the schedule for the remaining 2 meetings, including the public hearing, at this time.
And what time we need to find out from our two other commissioners their availability, because now I think we're getting to, you know, where the rubber's meeting the road and their input.
We scheduled the public hearing last time. At least Kiana was here, right?
Yes.
Kiana was not here last time. Keisha was here last time. We scheduled it for the 24th at 5:30. And that information, I believe I shared that information out via email. But if not, I can also put out calendar holds if that would be helpful for you all to have that on your calendars. But CTV has been scheduled. The public notice in the bulletin has been scheduled, and the advisory with the communications department to make sure that there's advisors going out to let people know that this is happening to our listserv.
So the hearing is on Thursday, March the 24th at 5:30 here?
That's correct.
Okay.
I did have a question on kind of like what you all would like to encompass in the hearing. In my previous commission experience, I was at the hearing and gave like a overview of like what the commission's charge is, et cetera, for the public, so they know kind of, you know, why we're here, what we're doing, and then opening it to the commissioners to, you know, say a few words, and then, you know, if you guys want to have some discussion around, this is what we've been discussing thus far, and then opening it to the public. So if you all would like me to prepare like some brief slides on the charter provisions and kind of step into that role and kind of give that primer before we go into discussion, I'm happy to do that. I just kind of wanted to see what your intentions were for the hearing, because, you know, a hearing could be as simple as, hey, welcome, we're the elected officials' compensation, and we're here to get your input. But I think in order to make it a little bit more substantive, just saying, hey, these are the parameters, these are things that we've been considering, and even just kind of doing some brief, like, we've received input through a survey and publicly accessible information of 17 cities, and, you know, we've been looking at the different things and kind of putting that together so that they have a primer of the work that we've already done. I'm happy to put something that's like a PowerPoint to do that.
I think that's a great idea. I also would be open to the chair or somebody, one of the commissioners, speaking a little bit about what we've discussed and kind of the struggle and tensions that we've had with full-time, part-time, and then comparing to other cities and going generally from that perspective. Because I know that all of these meetings are public, everything is available. Most working people do not have time to sit and watch 2.5 hours, 6 different meetings, right? So they're gonna show up and do whatever they do, or they're gonna watch at home because it's at 5:30 instead of 10 a.m. And I think that we owe them at least that short explanation. It might be something that we could work together to have prepared or
Yeah,
have
For
somebody.
you to do that as chair. And, you know, again, we are under conditions that didn't exist in prior. We're moving into a 9-member council. So that has to be a factor of our contemplation here. We've come through an economic bounce. That has to be part of our.
I think that sounds good, that you give everybody a primer, and of course, commissioners will be able to comment on that.
I'll have that prepared by our next meeting, which is a reminder, it's next Wednesday. We add an additional meeting at 10 a.m. And so I'll have that prepared. It'll probably be prepared before then, but in the case that it's not, you'll at least have it the day before the hearing, which is on Thursday, so that we can kind of talk about it here. If there's any, quick revisions or anything like that, you can let me know.
Yeah, as much lead as you can give us on the materials are appreciated. There was something else I wanted to, yes, here's the big difference today versus in the past. In the past, you would have a public hearing on this or that, and maybe nobody would show up for the hearing. And everybody would say, well, that's it, and they went on their way. Today, maybe people won't show up for the public hearing, but it's televised, and I think we do have an obligation to give those people that might be watching remotely an explanation or an overview of what we're doing. So even if nobody shows up at the hearing next Thursday, we still have a hearing to conduct, right?
Which opens up another question. If you're not here, is there a window or a website or something where if you have a comment,
Yes.
you can
So
enter it so that we can,
Yes, so I have an email, it's eocc@columbus.gov. And so people have been able to submit emails to that email address since this commission started, via the website page, located on the city's web-based thing. We have not gotten any emails about anything, but I do check the email regularly to see if we're getting any emails or any questions.
please mention that again in your comments. And I think we need to also give them a timetable. If you have additional comments, they'll be considered through this date, that date, because we're rolling right into getting this done.
Are people able to,
For council meetings, if they want to, if they're virtual.
So,
your question about virtual testimony? I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. Okay.
Yes.
yeah, so
City council.
you
That was
could,
my question as well.
it'll be the same, is my understanding. Because council has been maintaining doing the ability to give testimony via WebEx. I know that last year, I believe they only had one person that came and testified, at any of their meetings or hearings, but I believe the option is there, so I'll be working with Mark Carter in, technology to make sure that's available.
I mean, that might be safer than saying, send an email and we'll wait for 30 minutes to see because somebody
no.
will say, I sent it and you didn't get it.
Yeah,
Right.
I mean,
Caring for others.
it'll be, the public hearing has already been advertised as of yesterday, so they'll have like a full week's worth of time to hear more about it, because there'll be other advisors that are going out, and I asked our communications person to make sure there's one specific that goes out around this hearing. But, I mean, again, people can always submit their comments through the email, if they miss the hearing. So we are open to any feedback that people wish
There has to
to.
be a closed door at some point.
Well, there is a closed door, but the closed door is like, I would say, up until probably Monday, April 4th, because I think the report will be planning to be, and honestly, even before things, I think what I envision is that the report will be pretty much finalized on the 30th. And with the report ready to roll out the final, with the report ready to roll out the final week, which would be the week of April 4th. I did tentatively give myself the day of April 6th as a potential day for a final meeting if that's needed. I haven't put it on the calendar, but if that's something that we would like to hold, since the report is due that week, to have a final meeting, but I think it just really depends on what we're able to get done, over the next week and the hearing. And so that's why I was kind of being a little bit forceful, but, to have the hard conversation about what these numbers are going to be, and the reason behind it.
What I will do between now and our next meeting, which is a week from today, is to speak with each commissioners, probably repeatedly, to see if I can't forge together some sort of consensus that I will bring to that meeting a week from today for us to discuss.
So you want to be careful with that because that could be considered a round robin in terms of an open meeting. And so just be thoughtful in your conversation that you're having to making sure that you're not violating open meetings law by kind of having.
Well, I'll follow the same rules that members of council follow. Okay?
Yeah, no, I'm just saying to be mindful of that in your discussions to make sure that it doesn't appear that there's a round robin, that there's not an open meeting having a
All I'm
public.
trying to do is comply with the law and develop a consensus of the 5 commissioners.
Yeah.
That was my comment about, I think we're getting to a point, the meetings may need to be scheduled around the schedules of the commissioners so that we're all present. I mean,
I know that Keisha let us know from the very beginning that the March 16th date was a vacation for her. She had let us know that. Kiana, she emailed me last week and said she wasn't coming, but this week I didn't hear anything, so I was expecting her presence.
I spoke with her last night.
Oh, okay. I
And
didn't.
she was hoping to be here, but she's under the gun at Ohio Health with some responsibilities
Gotcha,
that
yeah.
hold her away, I guess.
Which is fine. I didn't hear from her, so I didn't know.
Okay, is there any more business to be conducted here this morning? Thank you all. Is there a motion for adjournment?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
second.
Okay, we're adjourned. Thank you.